March 18, 1944, northern France. The German fighter pilot from Munich had hunted American bombers for nearly 3 years, and by now the ritual felt familiar. Spot the straggler. Dive from altitude. Fire once. Break away. Count another victory. He had destroyed B-17s, B-24s, even the new heavy bombers rumored to be coming soon. But the aircraft drifting alone below him now looked wrong. It was a B-25 Mitchell, flying at barely 8,000 feet, one engine coughing smoke into the cold spring air. Shorter wings. Thick fuselage. Almost ungainly compared to the elegant flying fortresses he preferred to kill. His wingman laughed over the radio. "Looks like a pregnant duck," he said. "Easy meat." The pilot smiled beneath his oxygen mask. He already had 6 bombers painted beneath his cockpit. This one would be effortless. He waggled his wings, rolled onto his back, and pushed the stick forward. The Messerschmitt accelerated past 350 miles per hour as gravity pulled him toward the American bomber. The Mitchell grew rapidly in his gun sight. Then something caught his eye. The bomber's nose wasn't glass. It was solid, olive drab, and it was riddled with dark circular holes. Gun ports. How many could they possibly fit in there? He wondered. Lieutenant Jack Morrison from Akron, Ohio, saw the fighters first. 26 years old. Married just over a year. Father to a baby girl he'd never held. Only seen in photographs folded into his flight jacket. He called it out calmly from the top turret. 2 fighters, high right. Diving. Captain Bill Anderson already knew. He had flown long enough to recognize the angle of attack before Morrison finished speaking. This wasn't a standard Mitchell. Their B-25J had been transformed. Gone was the bombardier's glass nose. In its place sat a slab of armor and steel packed with 12 forward-firing 50 caliber machine guns, aligned to converge 300 yards ahead. 2 more guns bulged from cheek mounts along the fuselage. Add the top turret, waist guns, and tail, and the aircraft carried 18 50 caliber guns, most of them able to fire forward. In the nose compartment, Sergeant Tony Russo from Brooklyn rested his hands on the firing controls. 22 years old. Former butcher's apprentice. Steadiest hands Morrison had ever seen. 12 Browning machine guns sat inches in front of him, each capable of firing 800 rounds per minute. Together, they could throw nearly 10,000 rounds per minute into a space no fighter could survive. The German pilot followed his routine. At 1,000 yards, the bomber didn't turn. At 800 yards, it didn't fire. At 600 yards, he prepared to squeeze the trigger. That was when the air in front of him changed. Muzzle flashes erupted across the bomber's nose. Not 2, not 4, but a dozen. Tracer rounds ignited the sky, forming lines so dense they looked solid. Between every glowing tracer were 4 invisible rounds moving faster than sound. For half a second, the German pilot didn't understand what he was seeing. Then the bullets arrived. 3 50 caliber rounds punched through his engine block at the same instant. Oil exploded across the windscreen. Another shattered the propeller hub. One ripped through the cockpit floor, missing his legs by inches. The engine seized. The prop windmilled uselessly. Combat instinct took over. He rolled inverted and dove away, smoke pouring from the cowling, his fighter already dying. Above him, his wingman stared in disbelief. That bomber hadn't defended itself. It had attacked. The second Messerschmitt pulled up hard, climbing away without firing a shot. In the Mitchell's nose, Russo exhaled slowly. The entire engagement had lasted less than 4 seconds. The 12 guns had fired under 1,000 rounds. Plenty left. The modification had started as an experiment. Lessons learned from the Pacific, where B-25s had shredded Japanese shipping at low altitude. Remove the bombardier. Add guns. Turn the bomber into a flying gun platform. Now Europe was learning the same lesson. 3 days later, Major Klaus Steinberg from Hamburg dismissed the reports as exaggeration. 43 confirmed kills. 200 combat sorties. Veteran of the Battle of Britain. He knew bomber defenses. He knew fear. Bombers panicked. Fighters didn't. When his flight of 4 Focke-Wulf 190s spotted a wounded B-25 trailing a formation near Abbeville, Steinberg smiled. A teaching moment. He would demonstrate the correct technique. Head-on, shallow dive, cannon burst, clean breakaway. At 600 yards, he lined up the shot. At 500 yards, the American bomber opened fire. The sensation was like flying into a solid object. Tracer rounds filled his windscreen. Impacts slammed into both wings. Plexiglass exploded inward. His gun sight vanished. Smoke filled the cockpit. Steinberg rolled hard, diving away, already reaching for the canopy release. Behind him, his parachute bloomed white against the green French countryside. The 3 remaining German pilots circled once, then turned east without another attempt. They had seen enough. April, June 1944, Western Europe. The request to expand the gunship program never reached approval. Higher headquarters reviewed the numbers, weighed the costs, and said no. The modifications were expensive, time-consuming. The extra guns and ammunition reduced bomb load and range. The Army Air Forces needed bombers that could bomb factories, rail yards, bridges, not specialized flying gun batteries. On paper, the solid-nose B-25s were an indulgence. In the sky, they were something else entirely. Lieutenant Colonel Robert Hoffman's squadron kept its converted Mitchells, and mission after mission, they proved the same point. Overwhelming firepower didn't just defend a bomber. It reshaped the battlefield around it. May 15, 1944, Pas-de-Calais. Captain Ernst Müller from Cologne led 12 Messerschmitt Bf-109s through scattered cloud at 14,000 feet. Every pilot in his formation had kills painted on their fuselages. These weren't desperate trainees. They were professionals. They were hunting bombers headed for V-1 launch sites along the French coast. Müller scanned the American formation through binoculars. B-26 Marauders in the lead. B-25 Mitchells behind them. 3 of the Mitchells had solid noses. Gunships. He made his decision immediately. Ignore the solid-nose aircraft, he ordered. Focus on the standard bombers. No need to throw lives away attacking flying fortresses of guns. But Sergeant Danny O'Brien from South Boston had been waiting for this exact moment. 23 years old. Freckled. Short-tempered. Raised in neighborhoods where you learned early that waiting your turn got you hurt. He didn't like being ignored. He liked it even less when German fighters lined up on bombers he was supposed to protect. He leaned forward in the nose compartment. "Sir," he said to Lieutenant Tom Washington, the pilot, "they're setting up on the others." Washington, a former math teacher from Tallahassee, had already seen it. He adjusted the aircraft's position slightly, just enough to place the German approach corridor directly in front of O'Brien's convergence zone. Not an attack. A warning. O'Brien opened fire at 800 yards. The Germans weren't expecting it. Tracer streams reached out far beyond what any bomber should have been able to threaten. 3 pilots broke off instinctively, spoiling their attack geometry. One didn't. At 500 yards, O'Brien walked the fire onto the Messerschmitt. Not a spray, a controlled sweep. Rounds struck the fighter's wings, then engine. The pilot broke away trailing smoke. His attack aborted before he'd fired a single round. The engagement lasted under 60 seconds. But Müller understood immediately what had happened. The Americans had created something like an aerial destroyer, an aircraft that could project defensive fire outward, shielding others before they were even attacked. 3 days later, Luftwaffe tactical directives changed. Solid-nose B-25s were now classified as heavy defensive platforms. Avoid if possible. If engagement was unavoidable, attack only from extreme vertical angles. Expect heavy losses. The Americans adapted just as quickly. Gunship Mitchells were repositioned within formations, placed where their nose guns could cover the widest area. They became escorts inside the bomber stream, shepherds keeping predators at distance. German pilots learned to recognize the silhouette from miles away. Solid nose. No glass. Too many gun ports. Find another target. Keeping those guns running became a war of its own. Staff Sergeant Frank Rodriguez from El Paso served as flight engineer. 25. Former garage mechanic. He treated the 12 nose guns like living things. Each Browning fired at a slightly different rate. Left unchecked, the vibration could tear mounts loose. Sustained firing overheated barrels. Ammunition defects caused jams that could kill a crew. Rodriguez cleaned every gun after every mission. Inspected each belt by hand. Realigned mounts daily. He devised a firing doctrine for O'Brien. 8 guns for 3 seconds. Switched to the other 4. Then all 12, only when it mattered. On May 28, 1944, that discipline paid off. Over St. Omer, a full squadron of Focke-Wulf 190s attacked. specifically hunting gunships. The Germans came in waves. High attackers first. O'Brien engaged at long range, forcing them to break formation, while the nose guns tracked high, for fighters attacked from the beam. The Mitchell became a sphere of fire. Top turret, waist guns, tail, crossing tracer streams filled the air. One Focke-Wulf lost most of its right wing to a nose gun burst. Another had its cockpit shattered by turret fire. A third escaped with both engines burning. 90 seconds. 2 German fighters destroyed. 3 damaged. The Mitchell returned with superficial hits. The Luftwaffe had found the price of attacking gunships unacceptable. June 6, 1944, D-Day. While the world watched Normandy, Captain Hans Richter from Vienna tested a theory. He had studied every combat report, mapped firing arcs, identified a potential blind spot beneath the bomber's nose. Approach from directly below. 70-degree climb. Belly attack. He spotted a damaged B-25J limping home, one engine feathered. Perfect test case. Richter dove under the bomber and pulled up sharply. For a few seconds, he was right. The nose guns couldn't depress far enough. The turret lagged. His cannons tore into the Mitchell's belly. Fuel tanks ruptured. Control cables severed. The bomber began losing altitude. But the pilot, Lieutenant Colonel James Foster, 42 years old, flying since the 1920s, refused to quit. With no rudder, fuel leaking, engine overheating, he kept the aircraft flying 40 miles to an emergency field at Tangmere. O'Brien stayed at his guns the entire way. They crash-landed hard. The Mitchell was destroyed. The crew walked away. Richter's method spread through the Luftwaffe, with a warning. Perfect execution required. Any mistake meant flying directly into 12.50 caliber guns at point-blank range. Few pilots tried it twice. By July 1944, gunship Mitchells had become legend. Nose art grew elaborate. Dragons breathing lead. Grim Reapers holding machine guns. Names like Leadstorm and Alabama Hammer. German pilots had their own term. Hallemaskinen, Hell Machines. Luftwaffe intelligence estimated head-on attacks against solid-nose B-25s were 12 times more lethal than attacking a standard B-17. The mathematics were undeniable. 2 guns versus 14. Concentrated versus dispersed. Defense turned offense. August 1944 to May 1945. The kill over the Channel was Corporal Johnny Washington's first and his last. 2 days later, Sergeant Danny O'Brien returned to duty, and Washington was reassigned to another crew. But that single engagement earned him a Distinguished Flying Cross and a brief moment of wartime fame. Stars and Stripes ran the headline. Memphis Jazz Man plays deadly tune on Nazi fighter. Stories like that only strengthened the myth surrounding the gunship Mitchells. By late August 1944, the legend was firmly established on both sides of the front. But the war was changing. With Allied forces breaking out of Normandy and racing across France, German fighter opposition thinned dramatically. The Luftwaffe still existed, but it no longer ruled the sky. The role of the solid-nose B-25s began to shift. If fighters would no longer come to them, the gunships would go looking for other work. The 12 nose guns that could shred a fighter in seconds proved just as lethal against targets on the ground. Convoys, rail yards, troop columns, armored vehicles stalled on narrow roads. The gunships began flying low, dangerously low, sometimes 50 feet above the ground. At that altitude, there was no margin for error, no time to recover from mistakes. But the payoff was devastating. Lieutenant David Kim from Los Angeles flew a B-25J called Dragon's Breath. In his diary, he described an attack near Falaise. They caught a German convoy stopped at a crossroads, 30 vehicles packed tightly together. Kim came in at treetop height while his nose gunner, Sergeant Carlos Mendez from San Diego, lined up the shot. At 200 yards, Mendez opened fire. The effect was immediate and horrific. Trucks exploded. Soldiers scattered. Even tank crews abandoned their vehicles rather than face that concentrated wall of fire. In a single 10-second pass, half the convoy was burning. The Mitchell climbed away trailing smoke and dust, untouched. The Germans adapted, as they always did. Anti-aircraft guns were repositioned specifically to ambush low-flying gunships. Bounties were issued. Extra leave promised. Iron Crosses awarded to any pilot or flak crew that brought one down. On September 2, 1944, Hell's 12, a veteran B-25J that had survived 43 missions paid the price. Over Metz, an 88mm shell detonated in the nose compartment. Sergeant Tony Palmer from Chicago was killed instantly. The 12 guns were destroyed in a heartbeat. Without them, the Mitchell was just another wounded bomber. Captain Ben Franklin from Philadelphia brought the aircraft back across Allied lines, but Hell's 12 never flew again. The loss hit hard. Every gunship crew understood now. They were priority targets. Symbols. They kept flying anyway. During Operation Market Garden, gunship B-25s were thrown into close air support over Arnhem. Flying at rooftop height through intense ground fire, they suppressed German positions, threatening trapped paratroopers. New York Minute returned from one such mission with over 100 holes in its airframe. Sergeant Mike O'Connor from Buffalo, the nose gunner, fired more than 3,000 rounds in a single sortie. Shrapnel wounded him twice, but he stayed at his guns. Major Tom Wilson from Seattle flew the last 30 minutes with no hydraulics, barely any control authority, and blood slicking the cockpit floor. They made it back. Wilson received the Distinguished Flying Cross. O'Connor spent 2 months in a hospital and then returned to flying. By October 1944, the Luftwaffe over Western Europe was effectively finished. Official records credited gunship B-25s with 73 confirmed air-to-air kills and more than 100 damaged fighters. Unofficial estimates were far higher, but numbers missed the point. The real victory was psychological. Captain Paul Anderson from Minnesota, who flew 37 gunship missions, wrote it plainly to his wife. For 3 years, fighters hunted bombers. We were always reacting. Then we put 12 guns in the nose, and suddenly they hesitated. And in air combat, hesitation is death. Ground crews noticed the difference too. Master Sergeant Roy White from Dallas had been patching bombers since 1942. Regular bombers come back shot up, he said. The gunships come back clean. Fighters don't want to mess with them. Then came jets. In November 1944, German Me-262s appeared over the Reich, 100 miles per hour faster than anything the Allies had. Conventional wisdom said defensive fire was useless against them. On November 28, a gunship crew proved otherwise. Captain Jack Thompson flew Colorado Crusher toward Frankfurt when 2 jets made a high-speed attack run. The formation couldn't track them, but Thompson anticipated their path. Sergeant Pete Wilson from Portland had maybe 2 seconds. With 12 guns, 2 seconds was enough. He fired not where the jet was, but where it would be. The Me-262 flew through the wall of lead for less than half a second. That was enough to cripple its right engine. The jet limped away trailing smoke and crashed short of its airfield. The second jet broke off immediately. Wilson earned the Silver Star. Even the future wasn't immune to concentrated firepower. December brought the Battle of the Bulge. Gunship Mitchells flew through snow and fog to attack German armor pushing through the Ardennes. On December 23, when the weather finally cleared, Captain Bill Roberts from Houston led 3 B-25JS against a panzer column near Bastogne. They attacked in sequence. First aircraft blocked the road. Second ignited the fuel trucks. Roberts' aircraft finished the rest. 27 vehicles burned. But the Germans fought back desperately. Houston Pride was torn apart by flak. The nose compartment was shredded. Sergeant Jim Davis from Little Rock lost his left arm, but kept firing until he collapsed. Roberts belly landed the aircraft in a snow-covered field. The crew survived. The gunship did not.